That's an interesting question. In the 90s, boy, documentaries were all the rage. I mean, here they came. Yeah, through the mid 90s, and I mean, you had the Discovery Channel, and then the History Channel came along, and A&E, and it was one after the next. And we set our video recorders if we had to work to catch these things because you'd never seen all this stuff,
Yeah.
and you just ate it up. So it was very much alive. This is before Saving Private Ryan in '98. And we were, I say we, I mean, it was hot. It was all over the place. So it was very much real and current, by virtue of that. So when I went to talk with the guys, and I knew where they'd been, and I knew something about each of those things, I could envision in many cases what they were, on the cliffs of Saipan. Well, I knew about those cliffs, and I know that's at the end, and so, et cetera. When they start talking about the bonsai, did you guys see the bonsai? That kind of stuff. Well, we saw lights and flashlights and fires and torches and whatever. Oh, okay. So it was not, even at that point, it was not sort of ancient history. It was real. Now, a follow-on to that, which I think is relevant, in '98, and we were all just hitting the internet along about that time, 96,
Yeah.
97, 98, about 97. 98, out comes Saving Private Ryan. And Brother Dale Dye has done his duty and gotten this squared away. And in AOL, which was all the rage, much of the internet, that's where a lot of people started, and myself included, but they had these chat rooms, and they were flooded with millions of people who were sons and daughters and nephews and uncles, and I had no idea was what was in there. It was, they had no idea that their dad, walking around in a little light blue Sears jacket and tennis shoes, was out there doing this stuff, or witnessing it, or experiencing it. Sure.
Yeah.
So it was a massive eye-opening thing in '98 that came along, and these guys were certainly aware of that. And by the way, one of our Navy corpsmen, Danny Thomas. You say Danny Thomas is what the act? No, Danny B. Thomas. That movie did it to him. He said, I didn't know any better, and I went to see that thing by myself. And he said, about, I don't know how long into it, but the landing wasn't going under. And he said, next thing, he said, I was sitting next to this young couple, and when I kind of came to, they were sitting on either side of me, holding my arms, saying it's just a movie. But he was absolutely in tears, and that woke him up. And it was that year that I met him, and just by happenstance, I was looking for, I had email lists and all that stuff that would go around. I was looking for more corpsmen out of the 2nd Battalion. In fact, in Fox Company, I knew that there was a young corpsman they had mentioned. Anybody knew that young corpsman that showed up after Bankham was evacuated? No, I didn't know who he was. Never saw him before. So I'm sending out an email to this fellow named Danny B. Thomas, who listed as E Company. Reach out to him, said, I'm with Fox Company and so forth. And he replied, I joined Fox Company late on Iwo Jima. And he said, there's one sergeant in particular I remember, a big, tall, dark sergeant named Sam Haddad. I wonder if he's still alive. I said, I'm seeing him in 2 weeks at the reunion. You got to go. And he did. He showed up, and we went. Those kinds of experiences. And when I saw that email, I got up and ran through the house a few times, just back and forth. Found him, this thing. That whole period of time was bringing this history to life to the generation who not heard any of it, really.
Yeah.
So it was very active in the mid '90s. It was live and in person. And these folks they just retired a few years ago, 10 years earlier. So they were out and about. That's a long-winded answer to your question, but it was very real at the time, and was until when you lose the guys, then all of a sudden, the engines shut down and you're adrift in space. It's silent. And then in Texas, we got a bunch of family members together again and had a little mini reunion after the Iwo Jima commemoration. And I'm here to tell you, the engines fired right back up. It was just like having the guys there and having all these folks in the room together. And I'm looking at this going, oh, the history that's here wasn't in the presentation. I asked, going through the storyline, and I would ask these folks to stand up individually as we went along. And you could feel it in the auditorium. It was as though Gunny Douglas was there, even though it was his daughter or whatever. So there are interesting ways to literally keep it alive and keep it palpable. And the families are part of that.
Yeah, that you're talking about what happened at the hotel later that night.
Oh yeah, the reunion that night. Yeah.
Yeah.
I threw a little mini reunion to get all these folks. Otherwise, they'd never had a chance to meet each other or get together. So we had a little reunion over there.
That was great. And yeah, I got pictures from that, and just seeing, everybody, the big picture of everybody there together. That's pretty special. That's things like that, because of where we are, those are kind of more newer, getting families together, I think, because, prior to the World War II veterans, World War I guys, and I don't even know if I want to start down the rabbit hole if they had reunions and, like sending carrier pigeons to each other's house or something to get in touch. God knows, how those guys would have linked back up. But yeah, having the families there, and I actually was texting with Julie Wright recently, and we're going to have them come back on, just how they had them unite there. It was at the conference, right?
It was, yeah.
What was it? It was something like, it was her aunt and his dad.
His dad.
Is that correct?
Her grandmother. So her grandmother is Ensign Jane Kendi, the Navy flight nurse, who by chance became the first to land in an active combat zone on 6 March on Iwo, when her boss, the navigator of her plane, missed the island. So Jane's number 2 plane landed first, and by chance, she became the first to do that. And she's photographed by Lieutenant Gil DeWitt, and she's kneeling over a Marine comforting, and he's bandaged up like crazy. And that's Bill Wyckoff, Sergeant Bill Wyckoff from Foss Company.
Yeah.
And they were reunited 41 years later at the Camp Pendleton Iwo Jima reunion with all the units. And they reenacted that, and they kind of played. I've done a film on that I'm holding on to. It's about a 30-minute documentary on this whole scenario.
We'll have to keep an eye out. Good to know.
Absolutely. The short of it is, they ran a little fake, and they had hoped to, and told her they had hoped to have the Marine on the stretcher there to meet her that night, and played her an audio recording of Bill sending her a message, wish I wanted to be there, so forth. Well, Eddie Davis had told me years ago he was there. And he said, since I'd been the runner, they had me act like I was running out there with a message, which was that Bill is actually here. And then they brought him out, and they were reunited there. And I've got her photographs and all that of that reenactment, or of that reunion. So for the first time in Texas, when we were there in February this year, then as soon as I told him, I was losing it already before I could get to it. But anyway, we brought them up to meet for the first time, her granddaughter Julie and Bill Jr. And that was, again, that's the real stuff. And everybody could feel it. That's the real stuff.
It gave me bitch eyes for sure. Like, I'm sitting there, because I had no idea what was going on. Like, just when everybody was standing up and everybody was being introduced, and the only person really that I knew, well, other than Scott and Tracy and those folks, Clint, I did know Keith Kohler. I'd been to his house. I flew up to St. Louis for Charlie's celebration of life. Other than that, though, it was a very new, raw experience. Y'all did such an incredible job, like everybody that spoke. And I want to say it was our last podcast. It was last Tuesday. It was the 2025 is Cooked episode where Neil and I were talking about everything, and we talked about Julie and Bill. and she listened to it and then sent me a message. I'd love to come on because we're like, you know what? We should bring them on in like February. Because
Great.
wasn't it like 40 years to the day whenever her grandmother and his dad met? It was like 84. And then
And then, yeah. So it was
2024.
Saturday, 22nd of February, 1986, and then Saturday, the 22nd of February, 2025. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy. Once we realized that, I thought, oh, I'm laying that out there.
I remember I'm tearing up, man. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. I thought we're just going to hear about war.
It's a massive thing. And, I got myself, unfortunately, with that presentation, which you don't want to do. You got to hold it together, especially when you're in front of a bunch of Marines. You cannot ever do that. But I had it set up in such a way that all of a sudden now this plane lands and goes by. And I had that set up. And on board is 22-year-old Ensign Jane Kendi. And she's just become the first Navy flight nurse to land in the. Well, I was losing it already.
Yeah.
That just that intro right there choked me up, and I thought I'm not going to get through this. But it was such an epic moment. And all of that stuff. The reason, the three presentations I loved. I loved Rich Frank's. I loved John Parshall's presentations. So powerful. And they knew that I was going to come in at the operational level at Iwo Jima by design. Now I did it my way. I mean, the way I do PMEs, etc. It's one thing to know things, right? Facts, or even understand some things, but it's a different thing altogether to feel it.
Yeah.
And you might remember that the premise of my presentation was that it's very easy to think that this was a done deal when we go to Iwo Jima, because we got all this superior firepower and all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to show you otherwise. And so we go through the day landing, from in the landing craft with Dick Nisley, and making that landing and seeing where they landed and what it was like, and hearing from them a little bit to get to the airfield, and then jump to northern Iwo Jima and feel that. And then Jane Kendi and Bill Wyckoff happening in the middle of that. All of that is experiential. And then having the family members there with us lit that thing up. And to me, that's good history, because it's keeping it alive. It's bringing it to life. It's not facts, and it's not X's and O's.
Yeah. No, it was beautiful. I loved it. And that's what I'm saying. The way that you did the storytelling, from a combat veteran's perspective, I'm sitting there following. And then, to get into the family members and then bring, because it's weird. And I don't know if you've heard this from, the Fox guys, but man, I experience this disassociation sometimes. And it, just to be real, raw, honest, it fucks me up sometimes. And I have to it feels like there's two versions of me. There is the, enlisted younger version of me that did, war things. Mm-hmm. And then there's the dude now that's like, what? And it's almost like I can't kind of sometimes fathom some of the things that I did. I guess before I go on with that real quick, have you ever heard anything like that from?
Oh yeah,
like the Fox guys were.
Yeah.
It doesn't even feel like that was you.
Yes, and the other thing was, in their view, and it's not going to be any different. You're over in the sandbox over there or somewhere else. They had been sent off to another universe and had no idea they would ever be sent home. Therefore, they're going to survive. And when they start witnessing things, and they start figuring out what it's going to take to survive, and these folks don't know when to quit, et cetera, et cetera. So things happen. And I know, one of the Marines specifically, years ago, I sent a questionnaire out to kind of get some frame of reference on everybody. What did you do? When did you do it? Because they would move from machine gun unit to rifle unit to this, that, and the other. And I was trying to track who did what. This was before I had muster rolls and all that garbage. But some of the questions the answer would come back, sorry. That's all you got. You didn't get any more than that. They weren't going to go there.
Yeah.
And later on, as one of them said, I did things back then that I'm ashamed of. Granted, I got you. I believe it. I get it. Story. Yeah, sure. There's a whole lot of that. And later on, you go, well, you know what? As Gunny Douglas said, we were sent off to a different world back then. And you come home and you think, ooh, that doesn't fit, with being home anymore. If I'm articulating correctly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's almost like the brain does something to disassociate you from like the crazy and sometimes crazy bad things that you did. Which we do know the brain has its defense mechanisms, and we could go down like a couple hours talking about PTSD and all of those different things. But yeah, it's just curious as to hear your personal experiences with the guys from Fox, because we do talk a lot about, man, the guys back in 1775 are exactly like the guys in Montezuma, Bella Wood, Iwo. And I even joke about how you have Olympians swimming faster, jumping further, baseball pitchers pitching harder. But Marines are just the same. I think that we're just de-evolved humans. There's something in our DNA that you've got guys, because part of my job was demolitions and anti-tank rockets, anti-bunker rockets, and things like that. And so what do all Marines do when they get a long rocket in their hands? And then we see pictures from guys in World War II and Vietnam, and I'm like, and then I'm reading books on Bella Wood, and guys are joining because they want to get chicks and wear the dress blues, and I'm like, Jesus, dude, it's been 100 years. Like, we're all the same. So I think it's great, and the reason I kind of asked that question is for a lot of us new generation guys, the new breed, maybe if you want to call it that. I don't know what we're called, Generation Kill, whatever name they come up with, is you finding those parallels that were not so dissimilar from the guys that came before us, not just even in the combat perspective, but in the human perspective, that we all kind of deal with it the same. And I think whenever, like, when you get around guys and that you're handling things the same way, even in group chats that we have, there's something oddly reassuring there, that you're still suffering together, and that lets you keep going, that you're not alone. So, and yeah, the guys, the World War II guys, this was the second part. What I was going to go into was, even being a combat veteran, man, standing there, like, for me, the only real battlefield I've been to is Peleliu, and standing on the beach and looking at that airfield that they ran across and going up into the coral ridges. I'm like, how the hell did they how the hell did they do, like, and I said on another podcast with Tim, like, not just how the hell did anybody survive? How the hell did they just do what they did, above and beyond survive? And sorry if this is wrong, and instantly correct me if I am. Part of your presentation was really on, like, the fire team. That was your part, right?
It was, yeah. Yep.
Okay, because there's 4 different speakers, right? There was Kyle, there was Rich,
and John Parshall. Yeah.
John Parshall.
Yep.
Thank you. And so obviously Kyle's was on the flag raisers.
Yeah, right.
But I was pretty confident yours was on, and I don't think people realize, like, a corporal in the United States Marine Corps, the power of that position, the NCO is the backbone of the Marine Corps. And so when you were talking about, how the fire team won, Iwo Jima.
Yep.
That was, dude, I was like, fuck yeah, dude. I'm like, oh, because that's us junior enlisted guys, us four and done guys. Like, we get pretty pumped and motivated about that stuff. And yeah, that was it was a beautiful presentation. I know it was recorded. I want to say maybe the Pacific Museum in Fredericksburg has it on their website.
Right. Yeah, it's on YouTube as well.
Yeah. I'll have to
but you're right.
Those then.
Okay, great. Yeah, very much the point of the discussion in Northern Iwo Jima, which nobody gets. I say nobody, is that what won that was 3 Marines in a leader, or 2 Marines in a leader, or whatever it was. Or I used to say Iwo Jima was won by 2 Marines 30,000 times over. But that's how it's done. There used to be the old Gunny Renstrom, Keith Renstrom, when he was with Fox Company in North Carolina in 42, early 43, before the split, before they formed the 25th Marines out of the 23rd, and he went with them. But he was a sergeant, just made sergeant, and the Gunny, 40-year-old Gunny in Fox Company, told him, Gunny Gallagher said, I want you to study up for gunnery sergeant. He goes, what? Gunnery sergeant? He goes, yeah, they're going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm going to tell you what they are. And we're going to get you out. You need to be gunnery sergeant. One of the questions was, there's a point to this story. One of the questions was, and you remember very clearly, you've got 100 yards of beach to defend and 10 Marines. How are you going to array your Marines? And he said, I'd been briefed up fully. He goes, well, of course, you're going to dig 5 holes and put 2 Marines in each. He said, why are you going to do that? He said, well, it's a known fact. You get 1 Marine by himself, he might get up and run, but you put 2 Marines together, they'll stay. And so one of the answers he got, one of the other questions was, how far into the woods do you go before you start coming out? It was halfway. But anyway, point being, the alone is the enemy. Always.
Yeah.
Aloneness. It's that way in business or anything else you do, isolation, and combat veterans coming back. Alone is the enemy, and you ever allow it in combat. It is not a good thing, and it's core to what the Marine Corps is all about, and the establishment, the ability to respond to chaos and still make the right thing happen when it needs to, the right way, was why they formed the 4-man fire team, and then trained at it and tried to get good at utilizing it as well as they could. And so the guys that go to Iwo Jima, those NCOs, are all veterans through the Marianas and had been at the Marshals too, all of them. So the replacements that came out in 44 at Thanksgiving and then early right before Iwo Jima, none of those guys are leading fire teams or squads or any of that stuff. These are all combat veterans, and a lot of your replacements now are their privates in those fire teams, the green ones that get thrown in there in the combat. So they understood that, and I think it's when you start seeing that picture as well, when you start looking at the casualties, who those casualties are on days like the 6th of March, and how many of those guys are corporals. There's a reason for that. And one big reason for that is because they've now got these brand new replacements in their teams that they've got to mother hen, and they're up and about having to manage instead of just letting things happen as they naturally would otherwise. Just facts of life, but it's important to understand those things.